Hello and welcome back to the Work Love Balance series. I'm Austin.
And I'm Denise. And the question we're going to talk about today is who wears the pants when you're both bosses?
Let's talk about it. All right, so the question for the day is who wears the pants when you're both bosses? I think it's super relevant to add clarity to the conversation because we don't want any false narratives being shared. So, let's start at a place that's a little bit more sensible, right? And ask the question again, right? Is there even a boss? The reason we ask this question is because a hot button in gender conversation or in relationship conversations these days is gender roles and do they still have a place in this society?
Especially when you're not married.
Right.
So that's the perspective that we're going to be talking about.
Right.
So for those, before y'all jump in the comments, we're going to talk about it from a perspective pre-marriage.
Right. So let's start with an ego check. For guys, it is natural
Right.
for alpha males to be like, I'm running things, I run the show, I have the final word, what I say goes.
Really?
Completely okay for guys to think that. But the ego check is, when is it okay for you to be in a position where you feel like you have that much authority?
Right.
Right? So, fellas, the question to you is, do you think while just a boyfriend, because honestly it may sound like it's pejorative, but you really are just a boyfriend before you make the full commitment. Do you think that while you're just a boyfriend or while a person is just a boyfriend that they get that much authority? Question to you.
What do I think?
What do you
think?
think?
You said to the fellas. Well, to me, I think that you don't have the authority of a husband. Like,
Right.
you don't get the same type of, I mean, you get respect, but then there's like respect.
Right,
You know what I mean?
right.
So that's how I pretty much look at it. I'm going to treat you as a human being, obviously be kind. We got to have conversation and things like that. Like, I'm not going to pull rank on you necessarily. But at the same time, I feel like after marriage, there's going to be a certain level that's unlocked. That is just something that's special and only for marriage.
Okay, so guys, if I can do this, bring it back to you all. You ever seen, well, I know you've seen, each year there's a draft for kids that are really good, whether they're in college or high school. We'll talk about college for right now because they get to do something we'll talk about in a second. In college, there's a kid, he's top of the line, whether basketball, football, baseball, whatever it is. And there's usually an announcement at the end of the year where he says, hey, I'm going to this school, and he picks it out, and it's a big show, and everybody claps, right? That's called committing. I know I just cussed. But that word is called commitment, right? So when he commits to a school, of course, it demonstrates, hey, I'm making a it's supposed to be 4 years. Now, these super talented kids only stay for a couple years, but a whole different part of the conversation. It's supposed to be saying, hey, I'm committing to, one, making this school millions of dollars. Two, developing my career and letting my brand be directly associated with theirs in a way that's not even like fathomable before we make that commitment. The question is this: as guys, before you commit, right before that student picks the school, do you think schools are saying, "Hey, cool, go ahead and enroll in classes, right? We're gonna pay for you, but let's show them where the classes are. Like, let's get them started." No, right? And here's why: the student hasn't made a commitment, so they can spend a bunch of money, a bunch of time, a bunch of effort, and then he choose something else. Same thing with relationships. If you feel like you should have that much authority, well, then make that kind of decision. It's not tough, right? Beyonce talks about it.
It's not tough.
If he liked
it's not
it,
tough, right?
If he liked it, then he should have put a ring on it, right? And so what I feel like a lot of cats are confused by is the assumptive authority saying, because I was born as a man, then I get to roar and bark and do whatever I want to do before even making that commitment. But that allowance of authority, that position of respect comes only after you've demonstrated that that's what you want.
Yeah, and I think that society has put it to where women, we have to pretty much be a wifey, in dating relationships
Right.
before we get married.
Right.
So obviously I think practice does make perfect to a
Right.
certain degree, and it's okay to cook for your man and, clean and do those things. But at the same time, I don't feel like I should be fully committing myself to you in a wife role or wife capacity
Right.
until that commitment is made. And especially since it's not so hard, you just said it's easy. Then once the commitment is made, we can talk about all this extra stuff that
Right.
you might want.
Right. And so I could look, although it may be a funny conversation, right? It may sound like we're joking or kind of petty banter. The truth is, that's fair.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if anything, Denise knows me, and she knows that I'm an equal opportunity critic.
Right.
So whether it becomes myself or another situation, if that's fair, that's fair. I can't feel like, hey, like, no, this is a special case because I feel like I'm entitled. Like, no, like, that's legit.
And you do a good job about that.
Right.
Like, you don't impose, hey, you need to be X, Y, and Z on
Right.
me, and I can appreciate that.
Right. And so the reason I think that's important is this. You get into a lot of situations in which folks come into relationships with expectations.
Yes.
Something for y'all. Having zero expectations is ridiculous. That's a waste. That's a wash, and it's not something that you should probably bring into your next situation. Here's why. When we talk about expectations, we talk about how do you level set.
Right.
If this is a partnership, it's kind of like joining a new job. If I come in and start doing whatever I did in my old job, they're like, oh
Wait a minute.
You got too much dip on your chin. This is not your old employer, right? You got a different set of
a
rules.
whole completely different set.
Exactly. And so what I think a lot of folks do is this whole fuss feedback dynamic where they say, look, we're not going to talk about the problems. We're going to live. We're going to bring our expectations and our normal activity to the table. And then if something doesn't go right, we're going to fuss. And then when we finally here's the thing, with people that love each other, right? That actually like each other and love each other. They fuss, but they don't want to be fussing, right? They want to be in a good spot, right? So they'll fuss, and then usually for guys, if she says something that makes sense, you be hot in that moment. But eventually you be like, I guess she's kind of right. I guess she's kind of right. So then you get that feedback. You get that normal, even keel conversational feedback in which we can come to terms.
Right. You have to be open and transparent about.
But what if we save these people a headache, right? We learned this new trick. Well, it just came out in 2019, to be honest. Like, it's hot off the press. Here's the trick. What if you asked questions about what the person liked?
Yes.
And what they were okay with?
Right.
Like, before it was a problem. Right?
Exactly. So, to give you an example of a situation that actually just happened. So, it was pouring raining, right?
Oh,
and me and Austin were just leaving a business dinner.
Right.
So, we met at the restaurant. We didn't ride together because I was coming from my house. He was coming from his. So, we met at the restaurant, and I needed gas in my car. Because, ladies, if you're about to meet your man, you don't need to be putting gas in your car. Like, that's gender roles, right? So, when we left the restaurant, I was like, babe, I got to stop and get gas. Obviously, it's raining, it's dark. Even if it was sunny outside, he would have still followed me to the gas station. But anyway, went to the gas station, and I got there before he did. So valet brought my car first, so I had to wait, for him to get there.
Right.
And I'm kind of, on the independent side. He's working on me. And I was thinking, I'm like, okay, it's raining outside. It might take him a little while to get here. I'm tired. It's really dark. I'm at this sketchy gas station. Like, I just kind of want to pump my gas and go. But instead of just making that knee-jerk decision to, like, I'm going to just handle the situation. I'm going to get it done. He's wherever he is. I'm going to just get it done and go. I called him. And I was just like, babe, I don't really know how to handle this situation. I don't want you to be offended by me getting out and pumping the gas when you're coming to do that for me, and I'm, being Miss Independent and not letting you do your role. But then I also don't want you to think I'm being a damsel in distress and just sitting here waiting like, having this, attitude like, no, it's raining, you're going to do it.
Right.
So I really was a bit confused as to how to handle the situation. So we talked through it, and luckily, he came and pumped my gas, and that was that. But I feel better that I asked the questions about how do you expect for me to handle this? What's the best way for me as a woman and as your woman, not just a woman, to handle this situation? So I think that's really important in a relationship. Just have open dialogue and ask when you don't know.
Right. It may seem trivial, but to contextualize it, right? let's say she hops out, pumps the gas, somebody approaches, and it becomes a tough situation, right? I was 2 minutes away, and not to say that that couldn't happen outside of me, kind of outside of a different scenario, but the fact is, like, that simple feedback loop where
Right.
question was asked, answer was given, and then the result was demonstrated. It saved, not headache, because I'm not a rah-rah person,
Right.
but it saved the evening so that it could go even more smoothly.
Right.
Right? I showed up, it got handled, and then boom, we were on the way. So from there, right, if we can share anything, because the whole point of this is for you all to have takeaways, right? If we can share anything, it would be whether it's gas, whether it's food, whether it's the way that, I don't know, you guys walk into a room together, right? Who opens the door, that kind of thing. If you can have the conversation, it's almost like giving yourself a rubric
Yeah.
so that you know what you're being scored against. Because otherwise, you're going to be making decisions, and then you're going to get a 75 on that test, a 69 on that test. I'm like, I didn't even know
Like,
this was a
what?
test.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, that's so cool. So I think that, marriage obviously opens that door for you living together. And it's like, once you make that decision,
Right.
oh my gosh, the gender roles really start to kick in. So what do you think about cohabitating? I know we've touched on it once before, but we really hadn't gone on details. So I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. Like, what?
Completely fine. I like
What
being
do
on
you
the
think
spot.
about?
I'm one take fit.
Oh my gosh.
So no, seriously. As far as living together before marriage, so there's a bunch of economic discussion that can happen to say why people are doing it more frequently these days, because it costs more to live than it used to.
Right.
You can't make the salaries that we make and live in these big expensive cities by yourself and expect things to be all good like you used to. You may have to downsize, but that's a whole different conversation. We'll have it. But on the topic of living together, I don't think it's necessary before you get married. Honestly, I'm not a fan of it. It's not that you can't get to know the person before you make that final commitment. But I do think that there is a bit of, like, there is no extra mile after you get married. If you, you've lived together already, you spend all this time, like, you've done outside of signing the paper, you're married. It may be sensitive, may not, may ruffle some feathers, but the fact is, like, I don't think it's necessary. I'm not a fan of it, and I don't plan on doing it, and there's a reason why, right? When it comes to kind of being a man, having your own, protecting your space, and creating some sort of consistency and stability in your life before trying to join with someone else just because it's more financially feasible, right? Figure it out and get solid before just trying to join forces.
Right.
I think that's part of the reason why. And then there's also a respect, right? It's like, look, I haven't made the commitment to make you a wife, and so I'm not going to then put the husband pants, hat, and jacket on and play house, right? Until we actually work it out and say we'll finally get there, because guess what? Some folks don't get there, right?
Yeah, that's true.
How many?
I can be a witness to that.
Right.
I've been there,
Right.
done that. So I will not do it again.
And so-
but I've definitely done that, and I learned a lot.
There are famous couples. There are a bunch of regular people who spend 10, 15. The common law marriage is the thing.
Right.
So, like, people spend a lifetime without ever finally getting that commitment because it's like, well, why make it? We're already
Yeah,
here.
exactly. You
Right.
got to still make them work for it. I think that some of the traditional values have kind of faded away, and obviously I'm not perfect by any means, and I think that, but I do still believe in some level of traditional, values. Like, you have to make a man work for it, and they appreciate it, especially when with you, like, specifically, you're super traditional, like.
Right.
It's just the way that you're raised, and I respect that 100%.
Right.
So that's another thing about knowing your partner and what they want, and you working together to make sure you're both comfortable.
Absolutely. And there's some groundwork there, right? You can't expect someone to know what the traditional gender role looks like if they've never experienced it themselves.
Yeah.
A lot of people didn't have fathers in the home or
Right.
that traditional experience to even know what to expect.
Yeah.
And so, guys, I charge you to put it on yourself to make that standard, right? So that you're not saying, hey, let me just go with the flow or go with whatever's allowed. Make a standard, make a stand, and you'll be respected for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Because it's not often that guys set their own ground rules or put some guardrails around their own engagement with women. A lot of times they'll take it as far
That's
as it
true.
can go and say, look, I'm happy with whatever it is. All right. So in that conversation, it has to come up because I've seen it online as a hot topic.
Yeah.
Always has a bunch of comments on it. Is it 50-50 when it comes to the financial responsibility in a relationship
Before you're married.
before you're married? Or even afterwards.
Even after.
50% of the bills. Do you pay 50% of the rent? Do you show up with your half on the first of the month? Are y'all roommates if that's the case? Like,
right. What are your thoughts on that? I mean,
I learned this from my pops. I can't even take credit for this quote. You pay 50% of the bills, you get 50% of the respect. It's unfortunate. It is not commonly socialized, and it's probably not commonly accepted. It's not. A lot of people aren't gonna be okay with that quote.
Now that's his context in the form of marriage.
In the form of marriage, absolutely, absolutely. Before marriage, though, right? We talked about okay, you haven't made that commitment yet. So then the question is,
do you still have that responsibility?
Is it your responsibility, right? Am I stepping in and say, hey, because we're dating, you no longer have the expense that you would have incurred whether you knew me or not, because I'm just that great of a guy. Right? Let me give you a courtesy tax of like all your bills.
Oh my God.
It's like, and then as a response or in exchange, you get a couple meals out of it.
Oh my goodness.
That's the upside. Not you couldn't have gone to Popeyes. I'm just saying that like.
Well, I mean, I think that it can be a courtesy sometimes if
right.
you want to just be like, hey, babe, I'm going to take care of this for you this month or something like that. I don't live with the expectation that you're going to do anything for me. So everything that you do is obviously a bonus.
Right.
And that's just how I look at it. I know that after marriage, you know, you have, you know, the statement that your dad made or whatever, and you stick to that very strongly. But before marriage, I think that that's a conversation that both parties need to have. I don't think that you need to just have the expectation one way or the other.
Right. And things have changed, to be honest, right? The whole concept of the man bearing the financial responsibility of the relationship comes from a time in which there was less pay, less access, right? But now, after a bunch of guys went to war, women had to go to work, and we saw that, hey, there's an actual equality represented in the workspace. It's like, well, hold on. So we're both making the exact same salary, have the exact same financial burden as individuals.
Right.
But because we're dating, now my expenses are double. What happens with your money as a partner? That's a whole different talk to have.
Louis, Gucci, Fendi.
Well, go ahead and buy it. Here's the thing: that financial expectation is then also on the guy to buy the Louis, Gucci, Fendi, and all that other stuff, and pay the bill. It's like, wait, what am I getting out of this? Like, especially when guys make that commitment before marriage, because here's what's happened: they find out that okay, she's dating you, and she's going on other dates, but you've already committed to spending all your money, trying to impress, money that you may not have even had to pay bills. Now you're upset, but guess what? You didn't have a commitment.
Yeah.
So how can you really be upset when there was no contract?
There was no commitment. You know, if you watched our previous videos, you gotta have paperwork.
Right.
And that marriage license is part of your paperwork.
Right.
So, you know, I don't think that the full responsibility lies on either party, a woman to be a wife or a man to be a husband, until both parties have made that commitment. I know you touched on a man making the commitment, but a woman has to also make that commitment to be a wife and to put forth whatever in the realm of your scope of what gender roles are as a woman and a man into action once that happens. So.
Man, my partner is brilliant.
Oh.
I just gotta say that, like, you better talk. No, but seriously though, I appreciate that we can have a healthy conversation about it. Right. I know it's a robust topic. I know there might be responses in the comments or even shared on YouTube or Facebook. We're on a lot of platforms. We want you guys to subscribe, of course. But what we'll do is this. We'll wrap it for now and put a pin in the conversation and do this. Work is what you do.
Love is why you do it.
And it is possible to have balance if you build with the right partner. So I'm so glad we got that segment out. It was on our chest. Had to touch the people because the conversation is necessary.
Yeah.
Now it's time to get to the part of the show where we show love from our love bank, right? Thankful for the followings that we've gotten, right? Thankful for the positive messages.
Thank you guys for your support,
so
your
much
DMs, your texts. Great. Thank you.
It really has been great. And so all you have to do for a chance to win, a chance for your PayPal to look different tomorrow than it does today, is tag 5 people, follow our Facebook and Instagram, and then subscribe on YouTube.
I mean, why not?
It's really simple. You can probably do that in less than 30 to 60 seconds.
Click it. I almost said surprise. Click subscribe right now.
Click subscribe or surprise, whichever you choose. And we will see you next week. We're so thankful. And look, I'm glad I have an amazing co-host to fly this plane with me. because this show is going to only get better.
Yes, yes.
Thank y'all
yes.
so much.
Thank you.